Invincible is arguably the greatest active superhero show running right now. The writing is sharp, the characters are layered, the stakes feel real, and Season 4 proved that this story is only getting more ambitious. But there is one thing, one persistent, nagging, increasingly hard to ignore thing that is stopping this show from sitting alongside the absolute greatest animated series and superhero shows ever made. And it's not the writing, it's not the voice acting, it's the animation. Before anyone in the comments comes for me, I want to make this crystal clear. I love this show, genuinely and wholeheartedly. Season 1 was a revelation. For a lot of people, including me, it came out of nowhere and completely reset expectations for what a superhero show should look like in animated form. The moment Omni-Man turns on the Guardians of the Globe, a scene that still hits like a gut punch no matter how many times you've seen it. The moment Nolan sits Mark down and delivers the truth about the Viltrumites, those scenes are television. Proper, memorable, rewatch it with someone who hasn't seen it television. And Season 4, one of the strongest seasons this show has ever produced. The pacing was tight and controlled, the war arc was handled with a scale that genuinely felt cinematic, and the way the show built towards its biggest moments, slowly, deliberately letting the tension breathe, showed a level of storytelling maturity that a lot of prestige live action shows would envy. Thragg's full emergence as a central threat was everything fans of the comics wanted. Intimidating, brutal, a force of nature. If I'm being honest, Season 1 might still be my personal favorite, and we'll get into why in a moment, but Season 4 gives it a real fight. The episodes were gripping from start to finish. The emotional beats landed with real weight, and the Viltrumite War storyline was executed with an ambition that this show has been building towards since the very beginning. In terms of writing, in terms of story, in terms of character work, Invincible is fantastic, but we need to talk about the animation, because it is, and I say this with genuine love for what the show is trying to be, the single thing preventing Invincible from being untouchable. Here's the thing that makes this conversation complicated. Season 1 looked good. Not perfect, no animated show is, but it had energy, it had commitment, and crucially, it had consistency. The fight scenes had real physical weight. You felt impacts. The character designs were clean and expressive. The animation team was clearly working hard to honor Robert Kirkman's source material while making it their own. Think about the Omni-Man versus the Immortal sequence, or the final confrontation between Mark and his father, a fight that is as much about emotion as it is about punches. Those sequences were animated with care, with detail, with the understanding that the visuals needed to carry as much of the story as the dialogue, and they did. That's the standard Season 1 set, and is part of why it remains for many fans, and for me personally, the high watermark of the series. Not just because of the writing, though the writing is exceptional, but because the animation was keeping up with the ambition of the story being told. Since Season 2, that has changed. The drop in animation quality from Season 1 to Season 2 was noticeable enough that it became one of the most discussed topics in the Invincible fandom. And this wasn't fans being unreasonable or nitpicking for the sake of it. They were genuine, visible differences. More static shots, more reliance on character stills where a scene that should feel dynamic instead feels frozen. Fewer frames of animation and sequences that demanded fluidity. Fight choreography that started feeling like it's hitting its marks as quickly as possible rather than breathing and flowing the way action animation should. Season 3 had similar issues, moments of genuine quality interrupted by sequences that felt underdeveloped, and the fandom noticed. The conversation kept coming back to the same place. The story is brilliant, the animation is falling apart. Then came Season 4, and the frustrating truth is, Season 4 is both the best and most troubling example of this problem at the same time. Because Season 4 did have truly great animated moments. There were flashes, certain action beats, certain emotional close-ups, certain sequences where you could see exactly what the show is capable of when the team is given what they need to do properly. Those moments are exciting. They remind you of the ceiling this show has. But then there were other moments. And in Season 4, there were too many of them to ignore. Scenes where important, dramatically charged dialogue is being delivered while characters barely move on screen. That's a cost-cutting measure, and it's one that becomes more visible and more jarring the further into the season you go. Dinosaurus, a character who should look menacing, visually striking, a genuine physical presence that makes you understand immediately why he's considered dangerous. His design in the show didn't carry that weight. For a character with that much potential visual impact, The rendering felt flat, underwhelming in a way the source material never was. And then there's Thragg. Thragg in the comics is terrifying in the most visceral sense. Robert Kirkman and Ryan Ottley built a character who radiates dominance from every panel. His proportions, his expressions, the way he's framed in relation to every other character on the page all communicate that this is the apex predator in a universe full of apex predators. The show understood this narratively, his introduction was handled with real menace, and the writing around his character was some of the best in season 4. But visually, in too many panels and too many scenes, the design felt inconsistent, the proportions weren't always right, the detail work that should have made him look like the most terrifying being in the known universe wasn't always there, and this has been a consistent criticism from fans who know the comics well. Thragg on screen often doesn't match the Thragg they carried in their heads for years. That's a failure of animation, not of writing, and it wouldn't even need a much higher budget. Their character design was just flawed here. Let's talk about episode 7 of season 4. Because this is where the conversation gets most pointed. Thragg vs Omni-Man and Invincible should have been one of the greatest fight sequences in this show's history. This is a confrontation that the series has been building towards for multiple seasons. The narrative stakes are as high as they get. The emotional investment from the audience is enormous. This should have been a sequence that people were pausing, rewinding, watching in slow motion, clipping, sharing, and talking about for months. Instead, what we got felt rushed. The detail work wasn't there in the way it needed to be. The fluidity of the animation in key moments that demanded the full weight of what this show can do, was noticeably lacking. The blood and brutality that Invincible has always used purposely to communicate real physical consequences felt held back, and this show earned its violence. It's never been gratuitous, it's been meaningful. When Invincible pulls those punches visually, it undermines what the writing is trying to say. There was also a widely discussed still, the panel just before a major confrontation, where the character's poses and overall framing were flat in a way that genuinely surprised people. For one of the most anticipated moments of the season, it looked like something that needed another pass, another week of work, and it didn't get it. That's the pattern that hurts. Not individual imperfect frames, every animated show has those. It's the sense that key moments that the story has spent entire seasons building toward, are being underserved visually the exact moment when the animation needs to step up and meet the writing at its level. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because this isn't just about animation quality existing in a vacuum. This is about choices, deliberate financial prioritization choices. Invincible has one of the most stacked voice casts in animation, and look, the performances are largely excellent. Steven Yeun brings a real humanity to Mark. J.K. Simmons is chilling and complex as Nolan. The supporting cast is full of recognizable names delivering strong work. On a pure performance level, there's very little to criticize, but the animation team behind Invincible is, by most accounts, remarkably small for a show of this scale and profile, and that shows. It shows in the shortcuts, it shows in the reused poses, it shows in the moments where a fight that should breathe and expand instead sprints through its own pacing to get to the next scene. Look at what studios like MAPPA do with their flagship priorities. Look at how Ufotable approaches a major action sequence in something like Demon Slayer. The level of craft, the fluidity, the sheer density of detail in individual frames. Now those aren't different styles, different traditions, different industries. A direct comparison isn't entirely fair, but the principle that a flagship prestige animated series should have its animation treated as the priority, that principle applies everywhere. And Invincible is backed by Amazon, one of the most valuable companies on earth. The budget for this show should not be the bottleneck, and yet consistently, across multiple seasons, the animation has been the element that fans who love this show, keep coming back to as the weak link. If some of the money allocated to marquee voice talent went instead to expanding the animation team, to giving those artists more time, more resources, and more frames to work with, the difference would be visible, immediately, undeniably. Nobody is asking for this show to perfectly replicate every Ryan Ottley panel. And honestly, a longer gap between seasons would be worth it if the animation quality reflected the ambition of the story. Fans have said this repeatedly. More time, better animation, will wait, because a show this good deserves visuals that match. And that's the thing that makes all of this genuinely frustrating rather than just critical. The potential is right there. You can see it in the moments that work. When Invincible is firing on all cylinders, visually and narratively in sync, it is unlike anything else in the superhero genre. It takes risks, it respects his audience, it understands the real emotional stakes require real consequences. The story of Mark Grayson, a kid who grows up idolizing his father only to discover that his father is a monster who has to carry the the weight of a legacy he never chose, who has to figure out what kind of hero he wants to be in a universe that keeps trying to tell him the answer. That story is being told with genuine craft and intelligence. Season after season, the threads are tightening. The Viltrumite war, the personal cost of every fight, the relationships that define who Mark is becoming. It's all building towards something that could be truly iconic. But for a show to be unquestionably all-time great, the kind of show that people are still referencing and rewatching in 15 years, every element has to be pulling in the same direction. And right now, the animation is the one element that keeps pulling back from the pack. It's the gap between great show and landmark of the medium. Invincible is brilliant. It is funny and brutal and emotionally devastating and endlessly ambitious. And it deserves animation that does all those things too. Until Amazon and Skybound make that commitment, until the animation team gets the budget, the time, and the work for this show is earned, we are watching greatness that is just slightly out of reach. And honestly, that's the most frustrating kind. If you enjoyed this video, a like goes a long way. It helps the channel more than most people realize. And if you're new here and you want more breakdowns, deep dives, and honest takes on the shows that actually matter, please subscribe to Twisted Television. Every single subscriber is a part of building something here, and I appreciate every one of you. I'll see you in the next one.